All right, so get ready because today we're diving deep into something that, well, it's both fascinating and a little bit scandalous, the history of marriage and infidelity.
Oh, that's a good one.
We'll be looking at excerpts from Esther Perel's book, The State of Affairs, Rethinking Infidelity. And
But yeah,
it really does make you rethink things.
I bet.
We tend to think of infidelity as this huge betrayal these days.
Right.
But has it always been like that?
That's a good question.
To figure that out, we need to go back in time, see how marriage itself has changed over the years.
Exactly. Because, it's interesting. Marriage wasn't always about romantic love.
Yeah.
For centuries, it was more like a practical arrangement.
Right.
To strengthen economic and social ties between families.
It's a far cry from how we are now, obsessed with finding the one.
It is.
The book even mentions this historian, Stephanie Kuntz, who says that sometimes back then, adultery was the way people found love.
Yeah.
Because love wasn't the main point of marriage itself.
Exactly. It was more about fulfilling your duties within the marriage.
Right.
Not necessarily being head over heels in love.
Makes sense.
Security and social standing, those were the big things back then.
Not soulmates.
Not soulmates.
Right.
And of course, let's not forget, there were some pretty serious gender inequalities woven into all of this.
Oh, absolutely.
Fidelity was mainly expected from women.
Right, to ensure the lineage.
Exactly, to make sure the lines of inheritance were crystal clear.
Right.
The double standard was definitely there, just
oh, yeah.
in a different form than what we see today.
It really makes you think about how much things have changed,
It does.
Like, for instance, the book compares the stories of Maria in the 1950s with her daughter Sylvia in the 1980s.
Okay.
Maria finds a love note from her husband, but she just throws it away.
Yeah.
Pretends it never happened.
Oh, wow.
I mean, she had 4 children, societal pressure, and she depended on her husband financially.
Of course.
Back then, divorce was a huge taboo. But Sylvia's story in the 1980s is completely different.
Oh.
She finds proof of her husband's infidelity.
Hmm.
But unlike her mother, she has more choices.
Interesting.
She has her career, no kids yet,
Okay.
and divorce doesn't carry the same stigma anymore.
It's amazing how much changed in just a generation.
It is.
The book argues that with more choices came higher expectations for marriage.
I can see that.
It wasn't just about duty anymore. It was
Right.
about personal fulfillment, too.
The 1960s were a real turning point.
They were.
The book highlights feminism, access to contraception,
Mm-hmm.
and no-fault divorce laws as major reasons for this change.
Big changes.
So we went from one person for life to one person at a time,
Yeah.
and that has definitely changed how we see both marriage and infidelity.
Absolutely. Marriage wasn't just about kids and fulfilling societal roles anymore.
Right.
Now it's about love, sex, emotional intimacy.
The whole package.
The whole shebang.
The book actually uses a really clever phrase to describe this.
What's that?
We've gone from marriage being about procreation to being about recreation.
Oh, I like that.
And that leads to an interesting question, doesn't it?
Yeah, what's that?
With all these expectations, are we setting ourselves up for disappointment? Can one person really fulfill all our needs and desires forever?
It's a tall order, that's for sure.
Right. The book delves into this idea of romantic consumerism.
Interesting.
And I found that really thought-provoking.
Yeah?
It's like we're applying the same logic we use for buying a new phone to our relationships.
Okay, how so?
We're always on the hunt for the best deal.
The best partner?
The partner who checks all the boxes.
Right.
And we might be quick to dump someone if they don't meet our ever-growing list of expectations.
It's like we're shopping for a partner instead of building a relationship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's this constant chase for the ideal partner that makes us feel like we're missing out.
I can see that.
And that feeling, as Perel says, can lead to dissatisfaction and even straying.
And we can't forget about social media. It's constantly bombarding us with pictures of perfect couples.
And relationships that look effortless.
All those curated images can really warp our perception.
They can.
And then you have the different views on marriage between generations.
Oh, yeah, like what?
The book talks about millennials like Zach and Michelle, who see marriage as a capstone
As opposed to...
a cornerstone.
Interesting.
It's something you do after you've accomplished everything else,
Okay.
which might mean they have different expectations
Hmm.
and maybe less tolerance of infidelity.
That's an interesting point.
But doesn't that set them up for a bit of a shock?
Right.
I mean, real relationships,
Yeah.
they rarely match those perfect versions we see online.
And plus, delaying marriage until you've achieved everything else.
Right.
It means going into the relationship at a later stage in life
Yeah.
with different experiences
True.
and maybe less flexibility.
That's a good point.
It seems like we're constantly pulled between wanting individual freedom and wanting a lasting connection.
We are.
And that tension is at the heart of so much conflict in relationships these days.
Absolutely. It really gets to the core of why infidelity seems to carry more weight now.
More potential for damage than in the past.
Exactly. Because it's not just about breaking a promise.
Right.
It's about shattering this whole idea of finding your soulmate, your other half,
Yeah.
the one who's supposed to complete you.
It really hits at our sense of self-worth.
It does.
Yeah.
The book quotes Janice Abrams Spring, who says, infidelity in modern love is like a loss of innocence,
Oh, wow.
a shattering of illusions.
Right.
It's not just a sexual thing anymore. It's like an emotional earthquake.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
What's that?
We might crave this deep, exclusive connection more than ever.
Yeah,
But our culture, so focused on individual happiness,
that's true.
it can also make straying more tempting.
It's a real paradox.
So how do we reconcile these two opposing forces?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The book doesn't give any easy answers.
Right.
But it does encourage us to view infidelity with more nuance.
Okay.
It suggests that instead of just condemning it,
Yeah,
we should try to understand why it happens.
the reasons behind it.
Yeah, the unmet needs, the pressures from society that might contribute to it.
It's about moving beyond black and white thinking, right?
It is.
Not just labeling people as cheaters or victims,
Right.
but recognizing that relationships and human emotions are complex.
Absolutely.
Oh,
And realizing that infidelity doesn't always mean the end of a relationship.
interesting.
It can be a wake-up call,
I see.
a chance to face some hard truths
Yeah.
and work towards a more genuine, resilient partnership.
That makes me think about how the book talks about marriage evolving
Yeah.
from this rigid institution to something more fluid and adaptable.
It has.
We're seeing this happen now with open relationships and ethical non-monogamy becoming more common.
Right?
All these alternative relationship models.
It's fascinating.
And technology has definitely played a role in this too.
Oh,
Dating apps, social media.
they've created both opportunities and challenges for relationships.
How so?
They've given us a wider pool of potential partners,
I see.
but they've also made it easier to connect with people outside our committed relationships.
In both emotional and physical ways.
Exactly.
It's a double-edged sword, for sure.
It is.
And then on top of that, you have millennials and Gen Z.
Right.
They've grown up with different relationship norms than previous generations.
Very different.
They're getting married later, focusing on personal and career goals first, and they're more likely to live together before marriage.
This beta testing of relationships, as the book calls it, can be seen as a practical, cautious way to approach commitment.
But like we talked about before, this view of marriage as a capstone,
Yeah.
it could also lead to a sense of entitlement.
And a lower tolerance for the challenges that come with any long-term relationship.
It seems like there's this constant back and forth between our desire for personal freedom and our longing for lasting connection.
There is.
And that tension is at the root of so much of the conflict we see in modern relationships.
Absolutely. And it all leads back to the question of what the future holds.
Yeah.
Will we continue to see these evolving expectations and relationship models?
Good question.
Will technology further blur the lines of what's considered faithful or unfaithful?
Yeah.
Or will things swing back towards more traditional values?
Only time will tell.
That's for sure.
But one thing's for certain. Conversations about marriage, infidelity, and commitment are more important now than ever.
They are. We need to be open and honest about our expectations,
Yeah.
our needs, our boundaries in relationships,
Right.
and we need to be willing to challenge the norms.
And create partnerships that reflect who we are as individuals and as a couple.
Exactly.
And maybe, just maybe,
Yeah.
if we have these tough conversations,
Yeah.
if we acknowledge all the complexities and messiness, we can move towards a more compassionate and understanding approach to love and relationships.
I think that's a beautiful thought.
Ultimately, it's about recognizing that there isn't one right answer.
No,
There's no magic formula for a successful relationship.
absolutely not.
It's about open communication, mutual respect,
Yeah.
and the willingness to navigate the ups and downs together.
And sometimes that might mean getting some help,
Right.
whether it's therapy, couples counseling,
Ah.
or even just honest conversations with friends or family you trust.
Yeah.
The important thing is to remember that you're not alone in this.
Right.
Couples throughout history have dealt with these same issues.
Love, commitment, fidelity.
Exactly.
And by learning from their experiences, sharing our own stories.
and continuing to question and adapt,
Yeah.
maybe we can create a future where relationships are less about what society expects
Right.
and more about genuine connection, authenticity, and mutual respect.
That's a great note to end on.
It is. It is.
So as we wrapped up our deep dive into Esther Perel's work, we encourage you to keep thinking about these ideas. What stood out to you?
What surprised you?
And what questions do you have about the future of love, marriage, and fidelity in our ever-changing world?
Because ultimately, the answers are within each of us.
As we navigate the complexities of relationships and try to create something meaningful and lasting.
That's right.
And with that, we'll close this part of our deep dive. But don't worry, there's more to come.
Stay tuned. It really does make you think you know about what we expect from marriage these days.
It does.
We want it to be everything. Security, love, passion, friendship, personal growth, even lifelong excitement, and all with just one person.
Yeah, and that brings us back to infidelity, right? It feels like the stakes are higher now because it's not just breaking a vow. It's about shattering this whole idea of finding your soulmate, your other half, you know?
Yeah.
The one who's supposed to complete you.
It really does.
It cuts deep. It hits at our sense of who we are and what we're worth.
Exactly. The book quotes Janice Abrams Spring, and she says, infidelity in modern love represents like a loss of innocence, a shattering of illusions.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it's not just a sexual transgression anymore. It's a full-blown emotional earthquake.
But here's the catch, right? We might want this deep, exclusive connection more than ever.
Yeah.
But our culture is so focused on individual happiness.
That's true.
It can actually make straying more tempting.
It's a real paradox, isn't it?
It is. So how do we make sense of these two conflicting forces?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The book doesn't offer any easy answers.
Right.
But it does encourage us to look at infidelity in a more nuanced way.
Okay.
It suggests that instead of just condemning it,
Yeah.
we should try to understand the reasons behind it,
Okay.
the unmet needs, you know,
Right.
and the societal pressures that might lead to it.
So it's about moving past this black and white thinking, right?
It is.
Not just labeling people as cheaters or victims,
Exactly.
but recognizing that relationships and human emotions, they're complicated.
They are, and it's also about recognizing that infidelity doesn't always have to mean the end of a relationship.
Oh, that's interesting.
It can be a wake-up call,
I see.
a chance to confront some difficult truths and try to build a stronger, more authentic partnership.
That reminds me of how the book talks about marriage changing from a rigid institution to something more fluid, you know,
Right.
more adaptable.
It has changed.
We're seeing this play out in real life with the rise of open relationships, ethical non-monogamy, and all these different relationship models.
It's fascinating how things are changing.
Technology has definitely had an impact too.
Oh, absolutely.
Dating apps and social media, you know.
They've created both opportunities and challenges for relationships, haven't they?
They have in what ways?
Well, they've expanded our pool of potential partners,
Yeah, that's true.
but they've also made it easier to connect with people outside of our committed relationships.
Yeah, both emotionally and physically. It's a double-edged sword for sure.
It is.
And then we also have millennials and Gen Z who've
Z.
grown up with totally different relationship norms than earlier generations.
Completely different.
They're putting off marriage, focusing on their own goals first.
Yeah, their personal and professional goals.
Right. And they're more likely to live together before getting married.
This beta testing of relationships, as the book calls it, it can be seen as a kind of pragmatic and cautious approach to commitment.
But as we discussed earlier, this idea of marriage as a capstone,
Yeah.
it could also lead to a sense of entitlement.
Right, and a lower tolerance for the inevitable bumps in the road that come with long-term relationships.
It seems like we're constantly caught between wanting personal freedom and longing for a deep connection.
We are.
And that tension that's at the heart of so many relationship conflicts these days.
Absolutely. And it all comes back to the question of what the future holds for relationships.
Yeah.
Will we see these expectations and relationship models continue to evolve?
It's a big question.
Will technology blur the lines even further between what's considered faithful and unfaithful?
I don't know.
Or will we see a return to more traditional values?
Only time will tell.
Only time will tell. But one thing's for certain. These conversations about marriage, infidelity, and commitment, they're more important now than ever.
They are. We need to be having open and honest conversations about what we expect from our relationships.
Absolutely.
About our needs, our boundaries.
Yes, and we need to be willing to challenge the norms. you know?
Right. To create partnerships that truly reflect who we are both as individuals and as a couple.
Exactly.
And maybe, just maybe, by having these difficult conversations, by acknowledging all the complexities and the messiness, we can start to approach love and relationships with more compassion and understanding.
I love that idea. You know, ultimately, it's about recognizing that there's no one right answer.
Right.
There's no magic formula for a successful relationship.
It's about being open, communicating, respecting each other,
Yeah.
and being willing to ride the waves together.
And sometimes that might mean seeking support,
Yeah.
whether it's therapy, couples counseling,
Right.
or even just honest conversations with friends or family members we trust.
The important thing is to remember that we're not alone in this.
We're not. Couples throughout history have faced these same challenges.
Love, commitment, fidelity.
Exactly. And by learning from their experiences and sharing our own stories,
Yeah.
and by continuing to question and adapt,
Right.
we can create a future where relationships are less about meeting society's expectations
Right.
and more about genuine connection, authenticity, and mutual respect.
That's a really great point to end on.
It is.
So we'll wrap up this part of our deep dive into Esther Perel's work here.
Okay.
But we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas on your own.
Yes, think about what resonated with you
What surprised you?
and what questions you still have about the future of love, marriage, and fidelity in this ever-changing world.
Yeah, because in the end, the answers lie within each of us as we navigate the complexities of relationships and try to build something meaningful and lasting.
Exactly.
You know, it makes you wonder how the very definition of fidelity is changing.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, in the past, it was pretty much all about sexual exclusivity.
Right.
But now, with online relationships and emotional affairs,
Yeah.
the lines are much blurrier.
They really are. It's such an important point, especially now when we can connect with anyone across the world instantly.
Right.
And, you know, emotional intimacy, it can develop online just as easily as it can face to face. So, yeah, the idea of fidelity is definitely being redefined.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's not just about what you do physically anymore.
Just about emotional boundaries, too.
Exactly. And being transparent with each other.
Which is why communication is so important, right?
More than ever.
Couples need to have those open and honest conversations about what fidelity means to them,
Absolutely.
about what their expectations are.
Yeah, what they consider a betrayal of trust.
And those conversations, they might need to happen regularly
Oh, yeah.
as the relationship changes and as societal norms keep shifting.
Exactly. Because what might have felt okay a few years ago
Right?
might feel completely different now.
It's like we almost need to personalize fidelity,
I like that.
create a definition that works for each couple,
Yeah.
rather than relying on these old-fashioned societal expectations that are often just not realistic.
Right. It's about building a relationship model together
Together.
that respects both partners' needs and values
Yeah.
while also acknowledging the reality of the world we live in.
Right, and realizing that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to love and commitment.
No, not at all.
And, you know, maybe that's the biggest takeaway from all of this.
But
That as much as we might crave that certainty and stability in our relationships,
yeah, we all want that.
the truth is they're always evolving just like we are.
They are.
And that evolution might mean challenging what we thought we knew.
Questioning those old beliefs.
Yeah, and being open to new ways of defining love, commitment, and fidelity.
It's about embracing the fact that relationships are fluid.
Good.
Understanding they're not static destinations, but more like these dynamic journeys. And those journeys can be messy, unpredictable, even painful sometimes. But they can also be so rewarding and enriching and full of growth.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into Esther Perel's work,
It's been a great discussion.
we encourage you to keep thinking about these ideas.
Yeah, what resonated with you the most? What part surprised you?
And what questions do you still have about the future of love, marriage, and fidelity in our ever-changing world?
Because the answers, those are within each of us as we navigate these complex relationships and try to create ones that are both meaningful and lasting.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us.